Welcome to Friday Friends, RI Elder Info's weekly look at the organizations and individuals providing resources for Rhode Island seniors, caregivers, and professionals.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. It is Friday. It is the day before World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And as you know, here on Friday Friends, hosted by me, Deb Burton, from RI Elder Info, we dedicate the month of June to raising awareness of elder abuse and resources available to individuals who are aware of or are experiencing elder abuse, because only 1 in 10 persons report. So it's really important that you hit the like button, the share button, to help us get the word out so that we can reach as many people as possible. And Dr. Caspi, that we're speaking with today, is going to discuss some real groundbreaking research. So make sure you stay on, hit the like button, and share. Now, as you all know, we are a 501c3, and we would not be able to bring you Friday Friends without the support of our sponsors. So huge thank you to Point 32 Health Foundation, to Oak Street Health and United Healthcare. McCarthy Law is a wonderful sponsor of ours, as well as Washington Trust. We would not be able to bring Friday Friends to you without their support. So huge thank you to them. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Eilon Caspi. He is a gerontologist and he is a researcher on the topic of elder abuse. Welcome. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
So I saw that you've done some research that is groundbreaking. It really hasn't been explored a whole lot lately. Could you please share with everybody what that is?
Sure. So early on, Professor Julie Robinson did a study here in Connecticut nursing homes. She found that nearly 1/4 of residents were worried about retaliation if they speak up about care concerns. So we thought, okay, we need to look more into that. So I accessed 100 investigation reports from 30 states, and I analyzed them. And we looked into the lived experience of residents in their own words about how they feel about this issue of being fearful of retaliation when expressing right violations, care concerns, and mistreatment.
So I have a
So that's kind
question.
of the general background.
So in those reports that you received, were those reports that were from like the facilities regulations, or how did you get the actual residents' quotes?
So CMS has a website called Care Compare. It used to be called Nursing Home Compare. And another website of ProPublica it draws the investigation, the completed de-identified investigation reports from it, and allows you to have more enhanced search capabilities. So it's called Nursing Home Inspect of
Okay.
ProPublica. And you can search investigations in any state or all states with keywords on a particular issue of interest.
Okay, that is actually really helpful information to know. So if people are trying to evaluate facilities for their loved one, ProPublica and Care Compare are options that they can check out. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're looking at these 100 different reports from 30 different states, and you had said that the long-term care ombudsman is the one who had kind of tipped you off that so many folks were afraid of retaliation.
Well, we knew that this is going on because of the study by Professor Julie Robinson, and anecdotally we've known that from working with families over the years, and so I did that study. It was funded by the Long-Term Care Community Coalition, and there's a big report that is free to the public. It's called "They Make You Pay: How Fear of Retaliation Silences Residents in American Nursing Home." Everybody can access it. Very comprehensive and professionally looking report. That led to, okay, so now that we exposed it, what do we do about it? So I was able to secure funding from the Connecticut ombudsman under the leadership of Mary Painter, and now we're doing a project. I interviewed 47 ombudsmen from 32 states about their strategies and barriers in addressing residents' fear of retaliation in long-term care homes.
Wow. 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 So you're looking at the information. So when someone is a resident of a nursing home and they're experiencing situations that are less than positive, they're afraid to speak up about it because they make you pay.
Right. So we know for decades that there's a gross asymmetry of power or power imbalance between residents who are often highly dependent on direct care staff for meeting their very basic needs, whether it's assistance with shower or toileting or medications or getting out of bed. So we have to understand that context. And within that context, we can get into that, but, some of the things that could be done. Number one, you don't want to promise that there won't be retaliation, because we keep saying, oh, speak up, speak up.
Yeah.
But what if there's no protection? So there's things that we need to do. A series of things needs to be done, as I'm learning from very wise and experienced ombudsmen across the country, is the education/empowerment piece, to kind of break down the isolation. So first thing, you need to know your rights. You need to know that you have a right to express grievances and complaints without retaliation, without discrimination, and also you have a right to express those concerns without fear of retaliation. That's in the federal nursing home regulations. So you need to know your rights, and you need to find someone you trust. You need to know that there is power in numbers. There can be power in numbers. And one of the best ways, when it's done well, it's not always done well, is resident councils. As you know, you worked as an ombudsman prior. And there's ways to compromise. There's ways for staff to intentionally or unintentionally compromise the intention of resident council. That's a big piece right there. We can talk about family resident councils, a whole program. So you need to know your rights in resident council and how to run it well with a president that is strong and well informed. You need to consult with the ombudsman. You need to have a private, secure way to reach out to the ombudsman. That's not always the case when staff sometimes hover over the door and listen. You need to document events in detail. You need to use to install cameras inside bedroom. And I know it's not so simple. So you have to follow your state regulations with the requirements. And sometimes there's conditions that are unhelpful in this regard, but you need to follow state law. And we need stronger enforcement. Sorry,
I want to interrupt you real quick because it just passed this week that residents in long-term care facilities, if they would like, they have the right to have a camera in their room. That's like hot off the presses. That just came through this week. And I think that's going to be a positive thing.
Right. But we have to read the fine detail. In other states, it was passed, and it turned out to be worse than it was before when the law was silent, because sometimes there's conditions that prohibit families from putting it. So I hope in this case, it was a good, strong law that is resident directed and not industry directed. And there's serious issues of privacy and confidentiality of roommates, of dignity, etc. So all this needs to be taken into account, of course.
Yeah, that's the big thing. And I think, for people to understand that they retain all the same rights, even when they go into a long-term care setting, like that doesn't stop. The right to socialize, and the right to vote, and the right to privacy, and the right to handle your own finances. I think, you're absolutely right that it's important for folks to understand that. And, you mentioned the family council and the resident council. I would love to have you back on another time to talk about just those things, because that's super important. And I apologize, they're cutting the grass right behind me.
That's all right.
Yeah. So as you're moving through your process, what other findings have come up?
So in the study on fear of retaliation, I identified 4 aspects of this issue, and then emotional/psychological consequences, but also physical consequences. So, the first issue, I try to kind of map the terrain. What are the manifestations of fear of retaliation? And then I looked at alleged threats of retaliation, and staff threaten residents that they will retaliate or abuse them. And then I looked at perceived retaliation, and then actual and confirmed retaliation. And then we looked at the psychological effects. So in terms of psychological effects of any of these, of a combination of these, is residents very fearful, distressed, worry, depressed, withdrawn, some fear for their lives. There's direct quotes of residents fearing for that. Some of them will sleep with their, there's a grabber when they can't reach an object. They sleep next to it, so that if a staff member that they're afraid of will come, they could defend themselves.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and we can talk about each one of those aspects, but I don't know how much time we have and how much you want to get into that.
Yeah, no, keep going. This is great information, because I think it's not a topic that a lot of people think about. I think it's that fear is very realistic, and if an individual feels that they need to keep something at their bedside to defend themselves against staff, there's two parts of that, as the psychological thought that they're afraid, but there's the other piece of what is driving that fear, and how do we solve this issue?
Right. So in one case, a resident who was soiled in her adult depends had a staff member cleaning her with paper towels, and it was a dignity issue for her, and she asked to be cleaned with a towel. The staff member went and came back, put feces on the towel, and allegedly put it on the resident's nose. Another resident with severe cognitive impairment who felt undignified care became distressed and frightened and struck the staff member during personal care. There's a lot of rejection of personal care, undignified care, often unskilled care. And the staff member pried open the resident's hand, grabbed the pinky finger, and bent it backwards until the resident screamed. Talk about fear. And so
that's very realistic fear. Yeah. And I said that's very realistic fear, if that's been your experience in receiving your care. And I just want to clarify that these are not incidences that have been limited to Rhode Island. This is across nationwide, your research.
Oh, this study, which was published in the Journal of Applied Gerontology and reported in the report They Make You Pay that I mentioned earlier, was using data from 30 states in 100 nursing homes.
So all of these things are not just something that may be reflective of Rhode Island. I don't want people to watch and think, oh my God, because we have had a lot of incidences in the press lately regarding the care that individuals are receiving, or the incidences that are sometimes happening among individuals who have dementia. So we've seen a lot of that in our local press. So I want folks to make sure that they understand that not everything we're talking about is specific to Rhode Island when we're talking about.
Yeah, and I could add to that these incidents occurred in less than 0.5% of the total number of nursing homes in America. So we need to take that into consideration and be fair also, and balanced, right? But I want to add a piece here that there's an important distinction in retaliatory acts between subtle and more blatant forms of retaliation, and a lot of it is subtle. So you can be ignored, silent treatment. You don't need to use words. You can use body language. But there are many types of retaliation where you don't get your care. You don't have to say anything. You just don't show up to your room. They don't show, or you delay. You don't respond to colitis or delays in colitis. Sometimes, we say some people think it's a small thing, but if you're used to be greeted with a good morning every morning, and suddenly you don't get that, and you are lonely, and you don't have family or people visiting you, that's a big deal.
That's
And then
huge.
all the way to physical retaliation, actual punching your face, sexual abuse, threats of violence that are retaliatory, and very, very important to mention, the retaliatory involuntary discharges and evictions and dumping in hospitals that happens quite frequently. So that's another big fear. If you are physically disabled and you're being told, we're going to put you on the sidewalk or in a homeless shelter,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
you don't
that's
know where you're going
psychological
next,
torture.
so
Jeez.
it could be terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. So when people are having this fear or are actually well, let me back up a sec. For the people who have reported that they have been retaliated against, because your information is coming out of Care Compare and ProPublica, these incidences are things that have been validated or verified by the state survey agency. Is that correct?
In some cases, yes. In other cases, no. So there
Okay.
could have been another major issue in the investigation report.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was also a statement that the resident made about a particular incident that caused them to be fearful of retaliation or experience retaliation. So not all the investigation reports were substantiated in a citation was issued specifically for retaliation or threats of retaliation.
Okay. And did you find that this is for individuals who are more likely to be on dementia units? So maybe they're reporting being afraid of incidences that aren't happening, but they're remembering? Or is there any correlation with this for individuals who have dementia?
So the first part of it is that because the study focused on the lived experience of residents in their own words, most of the residents who made a statement about these aspects were cognitively intact or might have had mild cognitive impairment or early stages of dementia.
Yep.
That being said, a substantial component of my current follow-up quality improvement project in 32 states with 47 ombudsmen about strategies and barriers to address these issues. There's a particular question that we had in the interview guide about residents living with dementia. And there are major challenges, unique challenges in this regard. And so sometimes it will be a roommate who may witness a resident in advanced stage of dementia experiencing retaliation while receiving care, etc. But some of the challenges may have to do with misconceptions about people living with dementia, kind of writing them off. They don't know what they're talking about. When we know that prior research shows that when you create the right conditions, elder-friendly, dementia-friendly people in early stage and many even into mid-stage of dementia, depending which type of dementia, are capable of reporting reliably about their experiences, but they're written off. Oh, what do you expect? They have dementia. So we need more research to get into that. But also, ombudsman strategies are generally fundamentally different when they go in. As you know, you worked as an ombudsman. It's more based on observations. When the people are in a very advanced stage of dementia, and you have challenge interviewing them or for them to recall information, details about incidents, etc. So a lot of it has to do with observations. How do the resident interact with staff? Do they respond to particular staff members in a certain way? What is her body language telling us? Are they shutting down or there's fear in their eyes when a particular staff member walks in? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And for folks who may not know, you're one of the leading experts in individuals who have dementia and behavioral disturbances. But how you became the gerontologist, can you share a little bit about your background? Because I think your background is very interesting.
Thank you. So I started actually this year, 30 years ago, as a nurse aide in a nursing home where my grandfather lived. And since then, I worked as a, and what you learn as a nurse aide, you're not going to learn in any book. And then I worked as a social worker with people with dementia and in secure dementia care homes. Then I did my doctoral dissertation. I moved to Boston, uh, and I did a doctoral dissertation, 10 months observations on the lived experience of people living with dementia at all stages, how they go about their day, their emotional roller coaster, and what drives negative emotions and distress and behavioral expressions, and what drives positive emotions. So I followed 12 residents for 10 months, from the moment they woke up until they went to bed.
That's a lot. And I think the fact that you have personally followed through the care continuum for people, I feel like that gives you a really unique perspective as an academic because you have the lived experience of what it means to be those staff members. And perhaps it enables you, and I don't know this for sure because I haven't seen your research questions, but perhaps it allows you to position the questions in a way that people are more likely to answer because you understand what it means to be the CNA who has more residents than time in the day, and you have folks who have a multitude of needs all at once. You
Right.
have that lived experience as a researcher.
I hope so. Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned CNAs, certified nursing assistant or nurse aides.
They're the rock
They're
stars.
they are the foundation of the
Yeah,
care. And I want to make it very clear that the majority of them, I believe, and I kind of know that they are caring, compassionate, and dedicated individuals who want to do good. So, but the problem is that they are working oftentimes in a broken system. And one of the things that's coming up very clearly in my follow-up current project is that there's a potential relationship, wouldn't come as a surprise at all to you and others, between poor staffing levels and fear of retaliation and actual retaliation. So there's very compelling many quotes from ombudsmen across the country telling us that there's a direct relationship between poor staffing and retaliation. When you think about it, you can think about the mechanics of it, right? What are the pathways in which poor staffing, and we know we have a workforce crisis that was here well prior to the pandemic, it just got worse.
absolutely.
You can think about the pathways when you're so overworked and so understaffed, and you're running from one bedroom to another to provide personal care, and things go wrong, and it's oftentimes not your fault. It's just that the owners are not putting up front, allocating enough well-trained people on the floor. And so now you're being put in an impossible position. So it's not only cruel for residents, it's cruel oftentimes for staff. And
Absolutely.
that being said, there's also staff that are perpetrators of different forms of mistreatment. That's true too.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that when we look at healthcare workforce shortages, when you're a CNA and other people working in long-term care, when you have a heart for it and you see this bad apple treat one of your residents poorly, it's so frustrating, it's so demoralizing. You as that CNA want to protect your resident and you want to see action taken to
Yeah,
get that bad apple out because you're right, the vast majority are dedicated hardworking people who are doing uh, an amazing job with very little compensation, with very little time off, with very little respect and recognition, which
right,
really can go a long way. And sure, I can understand where a resident doesn't want to upset the staff. And if that staff now gets written up because maybe that day they were having a bad day and they lashed out, not okay. And now the
right,
next time that person goes in the room, they're not their bubbly, cheerful, hey, how are you, Mrs. Smith? How are you?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I want to relate to what you said real quick. Number one, There's an organization in New York, I believe in the Bronx, called PHI. It used to be called Paraprofessional Healthcare Institute. And for 30 years, they developed very carefully a roadmap for lifting up direct care staff members in many ways. And we can talk about this as a whole session on of itself, right? And but I want to go back to say, yes, oftentimes coworkers witness things that happen, like threats of retaliation, actual retaliation, other forms of mistreatment, neglect. But we have to understand that also they are also oftentimes fearful of retaliation from coworkers, supervisors, and managers. So
You're the one who snitched.
So I actually did another project looking at 50 investigations from many states, staff fear of retaliation. So it's not just resident. So they have the triangle is resident fear of retaliation, family fear of retaliation is a whole different, another piece here of the triangle, and then staff fear of retaliation. So there's three pieces here, and they oftentimes, like a perfect storm, converge to the point that people are afraid to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all of these different pieces all interacting, and family councils, resident councils, these ways of being able to assist people, get them connected. If someone sees something that's inappropriate in the facilities, if they suspect something's not going on properly, where should they reach out to? Is it their facilities regulations? Is it the long-term care ombudsman? What should they do, knowing that they're afraid to do it?
So there's an important distinction here. It shouldn't be, but there's a reality. There's a big difference between regulatory standards in nursing homes versus assisted living residences, or whatever the term one will use in their state interchangeably for assisted living sector. And in assisted living, there's oftentimes it's highly for-profit, weakly regulated. So that means weak standards and weak enforcement. Not that the nursing home is strong enforcement, but still, in nursing home, we have strong regulatory standards. They're not perfect. There's a lot of issues with it, but you can work with it. So the first thing you need to know is, again, as I mentioned earlier, is become informed about your rights. And one of the best ways to do it is, again, you need to know which setting, because you need to know what's the regulatory framework. But then contact your ombudsman and have them educate you, guide you, coach you about your rights proactively. Don't wait for the crisis. And if this is a good, experienced ombudsman, and there are many across the country, they can really walk you through about different scenarios that are relevant to your specific situation. Oftentimes, residents don't know that it's the specific issue they're dealing with is not only them. And so if you form a resident council, many places do not have resident council, or it's, as I mentioned earlier, is not operated as intended. So staff will interrupt, influence, take minutes a certain way that doesn't reflect the concern, don't follow through, intentionally interrupt. And so don't respect, here's resident rights, the right to have a private resident council if they choose to have a private. So a lot of residents don't know that. So again, know your rights, the federal regulations if you're in the nursing homes, or the state regulations for your assisted living, and then bring along the ombudsman and connect with other residents, break that isolation, get out of your room if you can, and connect with people in meaningful engagement. I don't like the word activities, and make friendships, build trust. Sometimes it could be the receptionist, it could be the maintenance guy, it could be the social worker, the nurse. There's got to be one person in the entire building that you can honestly trust, and then the social worker, and then the ombudsman. And if things don't go well, you can, if everything fails, there's also the state survey agency. And I know that in some states, they're not as strong as there should be. There's a big report recently came out, Uninspected and Neglected, how state survey agencies struggle themselves in terms of investigations, etc. So it's not always the solution, but there are resources out there. And sometimes, frankly, it also has to do with law enforcement. When we talk about retaliatory abuse, that we're seeing. Another piece is the consult with experts on retaliatory evictions. And for example, there's a great ombudsman in the state of New York, Susan Fenster. She gave a presentation on involuntary transfer discharges. So she's a great resource. She's an expert on your rights, because a lot of residents, as I mentioned earlier, are terrified of being evicted inappropriately out of the care home if they complain about the care, or if their family complains about the care. So know your rights and know how to protect your rights. You have appeal rights in nursing homes when you are being threatened with eviction. So you have to know your rights. That's the most important thing. Empower residents and power in numbers. That's what I would say.
Dr. Caspi, I am so glad, out of all the things that you have on your plate today, that you took time out to come on Friday Friends, because we've covered a lot. I have a whole notepad full of notes of things to look up afterwards, and I'll drop links into the chat as I look them up. But this has been amazing, and I really, really do would hope that you would be able to come back on and discuss some of these things further, because this was amazing.
Thank you. I want to say a couple of things real quick.
Yeah.
One is that the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care are about to release a fact sheet on fear of retaliation. So I want you to know that it's coming.
Okay.
That's going to be one resource. And last, I want to thank you for giving voice to the people who often we don't hear their voice. Their voice is kind of stays within the walls of the care home. So I appreciate you and your willingness to give them voice.
Absolutely. We are all in this together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Well, folks, we talked about a lot of topics today, and I know some of it was probably a little bit concerning, but know that if you or someone you care about is in a long-term care setting, that you can reach out to the Long-Term Care Ombudsman's office, and their number is 401-785-3340. And a long-term care ombudsman can come out and meet with you to work to get these issues resolved. And again, not everything we talked about today are things that happen in Rhode Island facilities, but they are happening nationwide. And it is something that we all need to be aware of. Tomorrow is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And again, we're dedicating all of our Friday Friends in June to raising awareness of elder abuse. So I'm really happy that you have stayed on. If you hit the like button, the share button, all those social media cues to let people know that they need to check this out, because the things that we talked about today are topics that cover all 50 states, Puerto Rico and Guam. And it's things that individuals need to know about in order to be safe and feel comfortable reporting when things aren't right. But again, here in Rhode Island, if you have to report an incident in a facility, you want to call our long-term care ombudsman at 401-785-3340. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. In the meantime, be well and be kind.
If you like this video, please follow us on social media and subscribe on YouTube. For more information, visit rielderinfo.com or call 401-585-0509. If you have any questions, email deb@rielderinfo.com.